They say the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Elena Hart had told herself hundreds, no, thousands, over the years. That Lucas loved her. That their marriage was built on something real. That betrayal was something that happened. To other people. Not to someone like her. Not to someone who gave everything. Her time, her youth, her loyalty, her love. But one night, all those lies unraveled with the flick of a single sentence. One sentence whispered in a half-renovated kitchen under the hum of construction lights and the faint scent of fresh paint. I regret not getting her to sign the prenup. She would have never seen it coming. That voice, that unmistakable voice, her husband's, and another, soft, sweet, cruel. Don't worry, Lucas. Once she's gone, it's all ours. In that moment, Elena forgot how to breathe. She was supposed to be at a hospitality expo in Portland that day. She wasn't expected home until the next morning, but she'd decided to drive back to Seattle early. The weather had cleared, the roads were quiet, and she'd been excited to surprise Lucas, to show him the new equipment she'd invested in, to bring him one of the artisan chocolates she'd bought at a little booth run by a couple in love. She wasn't supposed to hear anything. But fate has a way of tearing off masks when you least expect it. She had parked a block away from the new cafe location, Velvet Whisk's third branch, because of nearby roadwork. The lights were on, though. The cafe wasn't yet open to the public. She entered quietly through the back, assuming workers were still finishing up. Her plan was to check in on the progress for just a few minutes. What she found instead was a secret she could never unhear. Her husband. Her accountant. Whispering death. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning her removal. Permanently. Her body gone. Her name erased. Her life, her company, her dreams, stolen. And she was standing right there, heart racing, stomach lurching, hands trembling, unable to scream, unable to cry, unable to move. Elena had given this man everything. Lucas Moore, her husband of 3 years, had once rescued her from the rain. She had fallen for him like characters do in movies, by accident, with laughter and charm and rainy umbrellas. He had been a stranger with a warm smile and a sharp mind, a former police academy graduate turned corporate attorney. He was smooth, magnetic, too good to be true. And now she knew why. He didn't love her. He never had. He had studied her. He had sized her up. He had entered her world the way predators enter nests, silently, strategically, patiently. And Natalie Reyes had been her accountant, someone she'd trusted, mentored, even defended. A woman she had interviewed herself. A woman who had smiled at her across desks and coffee mugs. A woman now offering her boyfriend advice on how to cover up her murder. Was this real? Was this what her life had become? Elena clutched the edge of the hallway wall, unable to steady her breath. The voice inside the kitchen continued, calm and calculated. She's starting to lose weight. The public would think it's stress. We play this right, and there's nothing to trace. Should we make it look like an accident? Natalie asked with a cold casualness that turned Elena's stomach. Lucas chuckled. Maybe something poetic, like a gas leak in the new cafe. It's under construction. No one would question it. Elena backed away, hands over her mouth, body trembling. She knocked over a discarded water bottle, the plastic clatter loud in the stillness. She froze. What was that? Natalie gasped. Lucas paused. Relax. Probably a rat or something. The pest control crew's been sloppy. But Elena wasn't going to wait to find out if he'd check. She turned. She ran. She didn't stop until her car door slammed shut behind her, and her sobs erupted like thunder. From the outside, Elena Hart had it all: a thriving business, a loving husband, and a loyal customer base that praised her innovative desserts and community involvement. Velvet Whisk had become one of Seattle's trendiest spots for luxury sweets with health-conscious twists. Elena was known for her unique blend of creativity and compassion, often donating proceeds to local food shelters or mentoring aspiring women chefs. No one would have guessed her life was a performance. No one would have believed the gentleman who brought her tea on Sundays, who kissed her forehead before bed, who promised her forever, was planning her murder with her coworker. Now, sitting in her car in the dimly lit grocery parking lot she had pulled into out of sheer panic, Elena did something she hadn't done in years. She called Sophia Liu, her best friend, her co-founder, the woman she had pushed away because of Lucas. It had been almost a year since they'd spoken outside of work emails, and it wasn't because of a fight. It was because Lucas had planted tiny seeds of doubt. Sophia was manipulating the books. Sophia was jealous. Sophia wanted her out. All lies. Elena had chosen the wrong person to believe. Now, Sophia was her only hope. "Please," Elena whispered into the phone, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I need to see you. Something's happened. I don't even know where to begin." To her surprise, Sophia didn't hesitate. "All right, come over. You remember the way." Elena drove on autopilot, the memory of childhood sleepovers and late-night cramming sessions guiding her back to Sophia's parents' home, still nestled in the quiet residential slopes overlooking Green Lake. The same old welcome mat. The same porch light. The same warmth. Inside, the antique kitchen clock ticked softly, grounding Elena to a reality she feared was slipping away. She told Sophia everything, every word she had overheard, every suspicion that now made sense, the way Lucas had isolated her, the way Natalie had risen so quickly, the way her entire life felt like it had been scripted for someone else's benefit. Sophia listened without interrupting. Her expression shifted from disbelief to fury, then to something colder. Resolve. When Elena finished, her voice hoarse, Sophia simply said, "We'll fix this, but you need to listen to me now." Sophia laid out a plan. They would protect Elena's parents first, ensuring they were out of town and safe. Then, they would change the locks to Elena's apartment. Technically, it was solely in her name. Next, they would remove Lucas's access to business records, finances, and systems. Sophia still had contacts, friends in cybersecurity, law enforcement, accounting. But most importantly, they would gather evidence. Real evidence. Because if Lucas was planning murder, Elena couldn't just leave. She had to outsmart him. And more than that, she had to survive. This wasn't going to be a story of a woman scorned. It was going to be a story of a woman reborn. Before we continue with part 2 of this chilling true-style story, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss what happens next. Your support helps us bring more incredible, empowering stories to life. Now here's a question for you to answer in the comments. If you were in Elena's position, what would you do first? A. Call the police immediately, even without proof. B. Secretly gather evidence before making any move. Comment your answer below, A or B, and we'll reveal what Elena chooses in part 2. The next morning brought no clarity, only a deeper, colder silence. Elena sat on Sophia's childhood bed, knees pulled close to her chest, trying to will her mind into calm. But calm was no longer something she could access easily. The warmth she had once wrapped herself in, her marriage, her business, her dreams, had all turned brittle and cracked like sugar glass. She wasn't sure if it was rage or grief, but something inside her was hardening. Perhaps both. Sophia entered the room quietly with 2 mugs of coffee. Elena reached for hers instinctively, but her hand froze halfway. For the first time in her life, she hesitated. "Decaf," Sophia said, reading her like an open page. I made it myself. No surprises. Not today. Elena nodded, lowering her head. I still feel like I'm in someone else's story, she whispered. Like I'm going to wake up and this will all dissolve. Sophia sat beside her. That's not going to happen, and you don't want it to. Because pretending everything's fine, that's how they win. That word, they, landed heavy. Lucas and Natalie, her husband and her accountant, her partner and her confidant, now, her executioners. She had always assumed betrayal was a slow bleed, tiny cracks, a drift, a misunderstanding. But this was different. This was a blueprint for erasure. Sophia leaned forward. First things first, your parents. I already booked them a weekend away in Carmel. Told them it was a surprise from you. They leave this afternoon. Elena's lips parted, stunned. You did that already? Sophia gave a half smile. While you were asleep, you needed the rest more than anything. I figured if Lucas or Natalie are watching them, it's best they disappear now. We'll follow up later and explain. Elena didn't know how to say thank you. It didn't seem like enough. They left the house just after sunrise and drove back to Elena's apartment in silence. The streets were still damp from an early morning drizzle. Traffic was light. The city hadn't quite woken up. As the locksmith Sophia had called arrived, Elena stood at the edge of the sidewalk and stared up at the building she had once considered her sanctuary. She wondered how many times Lucas had walked through that door with a kiss on his lips and poison in his heart. Within the hour, the locks were changed. They went through every cabinet, every shelf, every bottle in the fridge. Sophia insisted on tossing everything, just in case. Elena didn't argue. They dumped everything into black trash bags and placed them on the curb. A symbolic purge. Elena packed Lucas's clothes into 2 suitcases, shaking with every folded shirt. These were the arms that had held her, the hands that had tucked her hair behind her ear, the mouth that had whispered vows of devotion. Now they were simply costumes, fabric draped over a monster she hadn't recognized until too late. But not too late. After locking the apartment and sliding the new key into her pocket, Elena didn't look back. She was no longer a woman running from danger. She was walking, straight into it, but this time with her eyes open. They arrived at Velvet Whisk's second location, the one near Capitol Hill, just before it opened. Staff members greeted her with warm surprise. Elena hadn't been around much in the past few weeks, caught in the whirlwind of renovations and meetings, many of which Lucas had insisted on attending in her place. Sophia waited in the car while Elena entered alone, waving off greetings with soft smiles. She didn't want to draw attention. Not yet. Today was about control. Not panic, not drama. Control. Natalie wasn't in yet. Good. Elena walked into the back office, logged into her admin account, and began revoking privileges. Lucas's logins, Natalie's access codes, remote systems, passwords, project folders, everything. She paused before hitting submit on the final restriction. Then she clicked. They were locked out. Sophia entered minutes later with her laptop and something new, her fiancé's contact. Ryan, a former FBI cyber analyst turned corporate security consultant. They called him from the back office. His voice was calm and direct. We'll mirror their communications. If they've sent any suspicious messages, moved funds, or stored incriminating plans in shared drives, we'll find it. Do you need a warrant for that? Elena asked. No, he said. They're using business devices and cloud systems under your ownership. That gives you full control. Ryan promised results within 48 hours. He'd set up alerts if Lucas or Natalie tried to access anything from their personal devices. Elena hung up feeling like she was finally stepping out of a nightmare and into something real, but that didn't make it easier. There was still grief, and it was vast. Grief not just for the betrayal, but for the parts of herself she had neglected for someone else's comfort. The decisions she hadn't made, the instincts she had silenced, the friend she had almost lost. "Sophia," she said later that afternoon, "if you hadn't picked up yesterday, I don't know what I would have done." Sophia gave her a look she hadn't seen in years, gentle but fierce. "I told you, I never left. You did. But I waited." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch in Sophia's living room, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above her head. The storm outside the window echoed her unrest. Thunder cracked in the distance, and for a moment, she imagined Lucas's voice buried inside it, calling her name with that same velvety tone he always used when he wanted to manipulate her. She shivered, not from fear, but from anticipation. She would confront him. She would take back what he tried to steal. Not just the company, not just her finances, but herself, her future, her power. She had loved him, but he had chosen something else, and that choice would cost him everything. The next day, they prepared. The stage. Elena scheduled a one-on-one meeting with Natalie under the pretense of reviewing quarterlies. Meanwhile, Sophia coordinated with Ryan to have screen recording software run silently in the background. If Natalie tried to delete anything incriminating, it would be logged. They had also drafted a resignation offer, one that would give Natalie an exit if she wanted it. But it came with conditions, silence, confession, and the immediate return of all company property. "Do you think she'll take it?" Elena asked. "I don't care," Sophia replied. "Either way, we win." Later that afternoon, Lucas called. Elena didn't answer. He called again. Then texted. "Hey, beautiful. Haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" Elena stared at the screen and laughed bitterly. The same hands that planned her demise were now sending emojis. When the day ended and they returned to Sophia's house, Elena felt something strange. Clarity. The pain was still there, of course. But something else had replaced the despair. A quiet knowing. She wasn't alone. She wasn't powerless. She was no longer waiting to be rescued. She was preparing to rescue herself. She pulled out her journal for the first time in months and wrote only one sentence. "They thought they were planning my end. But they've triggered my beginning." She closed the journal and turned off the light. The war hadn't started yet, but the storm was building, and Elena Hart was ready to fight. The morning air carried an unusual stillness, as if even the city itself was holding its breath. Elena sat behind her desk in the back office of Velvet Whisk's second location, her hands resting on the surface, fingers unmoving, eyes fixed on the glowing screen before her. The room smelled faintly of lavender-scented disinfectant and freshly ground coffee, ordinary things that used to bring comfort. Now they just sharpened the contrast between what her life had been and what it had become. Today was not ordinary. Today was reckoning. Sophia had already gone over the plan 3 times. The files had been duplicated, the passwords changed, the cameras enabled. Ryan had encrypted everything on the server and made sure all incoming and outgoing traffic was being recorded. If Natalie made even the smallest mistake, they would catch it. Elena's job was to remain composed, to speak just enough, to offer just enough rope, and let Natalie tie her own noose. At exactly 9 a.m., Natalie entered the cafe like it was just another Tuesday. She wore her usual blazer, this time, in a soft mauve, and carried a travel mug that matched her lipstick. Her heels clicked confidently on the tiled floor as she made her way toward the back, her tablet tucked beneath her arm like a soldier's weapon. Elena heard her approach and forced herself to breathe, slow and steady. She wasn't the same woman who had run from a whispered conversation 3 nights ago. That woman had been afraid. This one was dangerous. "Morning, Elena," Natalie said, her voice bright. "You're in early. Everything all right?" Elena smiled politely. "Yes. I thought we could go over the quarterly projections together before things get busy." "Of course," Natalie said without hesitation. "Let me just pull them up." She sat across from Elena and opened her tablet. Elena watched her carefully. Natalie's face revealed nothing. No anxiety, no guilt. Just professionalism. Polished, precise. A performance so perfected, it almost made Elena question her own certainty. But then she remembered the voices, the words, the casual way Natalie had said, "Once she's gone," the way Lucas had laughed about a gas leak. That was truth. This now was the lie. As they reviewed the numbers, Elena casually brought up a few expense lines she knew were altered, details Sophia had unearthed. With Ryan's help, Natalie didn't flinch. "Oh, that," she said smoothly. "We switched vendors last month. Better rates on paper goods. I can pull the invoices if you like." "Please do," Elena replied. Natalie smiled and tapped on her screen. As she navigated, Ryan's system began logging her activity. Every folder she opened, every document she clicked, every timestamp, it was all being mirrored to a hidden server. And then, the moment came. Natalie hesitated. Just a blink. Just long enough to betray awareness. "You know," she said slowly, "I can update all this later if you're swamped. Why don't we circle back this afternoon?" Elena leaned forward. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else." Natalie blinked. "Oh?" Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't change her tone. She just placed a single envelope on the table between them. It was thick, heavy, the kind of envelope that whispered consequences. "What's this?" "A resignation offer," Elena said softly, "with a few conditions." Natalie's face remained still, but her eyes flickered, just enough to betray the tremor behind the calm. "I don't understand." "You will," Elena said. "You can either leave quietly, return all company property, and agree to never contact me or Lucas again. Or we can go to court. We've already pulled the files, Natalie. The fake invoices, the fund redirection, the mirrored server access, all of it." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fridge in the break room next door. Natalie didn't reach for the envelope. Instead, she narrowed her eyes. "You're bluffing." Elena met her gaze, unwavering. "No, Natalie. I was bluffing when I said you were doing a great job. I was bluffing when I smiled at you every morning, knowing something felt off. But now? Now I'm just done pretending." Natalie stood, pushing back her chair. She didn't grab the envelope. She didn't storm out. She simply looked down at Elena, and for the first time her smile dropped. "You have no idea what Lucas is capable of," she said. "You think, this is over, but it's just beginning." Elena stood too. "You're right," she replied. "It is just beginning. But I'm not the one who should be afraid of what's coming." Natalie didn't respond. She left the office, tablet under her arm, jaw tight. Elena waited until she was gone, then exhaled. Sophia stepped in from the hallway a moment later, holding up her phone where the entire interaction had been recorded, via the office's security camera. "Well?" she asked. "She's scared," Elena said. "But she's not running yet." "She will," Sophia said. "They always do once the game flips." Later that day, Elena sent Lucas an official notice of divorce, along with a restraining order and documentation of financial fraud. She CC'd the family attorney they had both worked with years ago, one of the few people who had remained neutral throughout their marriage. The response came quickly. Lucas emailed, then called, then texted, all variations of the same message. Confusion, denial, gaslighting. "I don't know what's gotten into you. We can work this out. You're being manipulated. Let's talk. Just us. No lawyers." Elena didn't respond. By the evening, Lucas appeared at the cafe in person. He arrived just after closing, dressed in a navy blue blazer and that same cologne he used to wear during their early dates. Elena was in the back office reviewing files when she heard the familiar tap of his knuckles against the glass. "Come to see the damage?" she asked without looking up. "I came to understand it," Lucas said. "To make things right." Elena stood, slowly. "You plan to kill me?" Lucas blinked. "What?" "I heard you. That night, you and Natalie, talking about cremation, gas leaks, calling me dead weight, laughing about prenups." His jaw tightened. "You misunderstood." "No, Lucas. I finally understood." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped forward, voice low. "You want to destroy everything we built together over one bad moment? One conversation you think you heard?" "You didn't build it," she said. "You stole it, or tried to, and you failed." Lucas laughed bitterly. "You think this is the end? You think you're going to win because you've got your little best friend and some file backups?" Elena looked him dead in the eye. "No, Lucas. I'm going to win because I've already lost everything worth losing. There's nothing left you can take from me." At that, he faltered, and then a new voice entered the room. "I believe you forgot your key," Sophia said, stepping in and tossing the old house key at his feet. "You won't be needing it anymore." Lucas stared at them both, rage flaring behind his eyes. But he didn't pick up the key. He didn't speak again. He simply turned and walked out, the door shutting behind him with a thud that echoed through the office like a final warning. Later that night, back at Sophia's home, Elena sat beside the fireplace, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The fire crackled, soft and steady. The adrenaline was gone now, the high of confrontation replaced by the dull ache of reality. The hardest part was over, but the real battle had just begun. Sophia brought her tea and sat beside her. "Do you feel better?" she asked. "No," Elena said. "But I feel clean, like I finally rinsed out something rotten that had been sitting inside me for years." They sat in silence for a while, watching the flames. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. A quiet storm passing. Elena didn't fear storms anymore. She had learned to stand in the eye of one, and not flinch. The days that followed felt like walking across a minefield, each step deliberate, each hour sharp with tension. The confrontation was done, the storm had broken, but Elena knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Lucas wouldn't go quietly, and Natalie, slippery as she was, had more than one mask left to wear. Elena stood in her newly renovated apartment, one that no longer bore any memory of Lucas's presence. The walls had been painted a lighter shade, the furniture rearranged, the energy cleansed, literally and metaphorically. She'd even burned the last candle he ever bought her. It smelled like lies now. She had thought at the time that it was love. It wasn't. The woman in the mirror now was not the same person who had once smiled at breakfast with hope and blind affection. This woman, her eyes were still tired, but they no longer looked for answers in someone else. They were focused, grounded. It was not rage that fueled her anymore. It was something sharper, clarity. The legal proceedings moved quickly, to Elena's relief. The evidence gathered by Sophia and Ryan left little room for ambiguity. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft. While Elena hadn't pushed the matter of attempted murder, there was no audio recording of the conversation she'd overheard. What she had was enough to press serious civil charges and bar Lucas from ever touching the business again. Natalie, on the other hand, chose silence. No confession, no resignation, no apology. She simply disappeared from the company, never returning to clean out her desk. Her access had already been revoked. Her reputation in Seattle's financial scene began to erode quietly, as Elena and Sophia began to share documented discrepancies with a few key contacts, enough to blackball her from any respectable firm, without a public scandal. Elena didn't want revenge that burned. She wanted justice that lasted. But the fallout still came with its own price. The cafe staff had questions. Rumors circulated. Customers noticed changes. Elena stood in front of her team one morning, no script, no PR polish, and told the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. "There are moments in business," she began, "when people you trust turn out to be very different from who they appeared to be. We're undergoing changes because of that. And though some of those changes are difficult, they are necessary. This company will always be built on trust and integrity. That hasn't changed. That won't change." She didn't name names. She didn't need to. But the staff, some of whom had worked with her since the very first Velvet Whisk opened, nodded silently. They stood with her. That quiet solidarity meant more than applause. It meant she wasn't alone. Sophia continued to help with damage control while managing her own blooming career. Elena knew her friend had sacrificed time and energy to stand beside her, and though Sophia had insisted it was nothing, Elena knew better. Healing was happening, but it wasn't linear. Some nights Elena still woke up to phantom touches. Lucas's hand brushing her shoulder in a dream. She'd jolt upright, sweat on her back, wondering how she had ever slept beside someone capable of such darkness. She began to change her routines, joined a women's entrepreneur circle, started hiking on weekends with Sophia when their schedules aligned, meditation classes, silent breakfasts, therapy. Even if only once a week, she made space to sit with her emotions instead of rushing past them. And then there was Daniel. She met him at a community fundraiser for local food programs, an event Velvet Whisk had long supported. He wasn't flashy or clever in the way Lucas had been. He didn't have that lawyer's grin that made women lean forward. Daniel was quiet, thoughtful, and confident in an unassuming way. He introduced himself while picking up a tray of gluten-free lemon bars from the dessert table. "You made these?" he asked, holding one up with amused curiosity. Elena smiled. "They're our bestseller. Be warned, they're addictive." "I like addictive," he said, taking a bite. "At least when it's honest." It was the first time in weeks she'd laughed without thinking about who was watching. Their conversations became regular after that. Slow, natural, unforced. He didn't press her about her past. He didn't try to insert himself into her space. He simply showed up, at the cafe, at the park, eventually in her thoughts. They exchanged numbers, and before she realized it, she was checking her phone just to see if his name would appear. But she was cautious. She had learned too much to move fast again. When he finally asked her out, she didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, "I'm still healing." He nodded. "Then let's not call it a date. Let's call it a walk. You tell me where, I'll bring the coffee." They walked Green Lake Trail the following Saturday, talked about favorite books, least favorite movies, childhood ambitions, and why Seattle had the most unpredictable weather. Not once did he try to impress her. Not once did she feel she had to earn his attention. It felt like air. Meanwhile, Lucas's life was unraveling in slow, public ways. Word spread that he'd been removed from his firm after a private investigation revealed financial misconduct. He tried to file a countersuit against Elena for emotional distress, but it was immediately dismissed. Without Natalie's testimony, without evidence, he had nothing, and he knew it. One day, Elena received a letter, not from a lawyer, not official, just a handwritten envelope with no return address. Inside, a single page in Lucas's unmistakable script. "I thought I was in control, but it turns out you were the only one holding anything real. I hope that gives you peace, because it's all you'll get from me." She burned the letter in her sink without reading it twice. Elena continued to reshape her life with slow precision. She made the decision to sell the location where she'd first overheard Lucas and Natalie. Though it was profitable, she couldn't walk through those walls without remembering the weight of fear in her chest. She paid a fine to end the lease early and donated part of the refund to a women's legal aid fund. Her energy shifted after that. Even Sophia noticed. "You're not carrying it the same anymore," she observed one morning over coffee. Elena stirred her spoon slowly. I think I'm done trying to get answers. Some things break, and no matter how long you stare at the pieces, they won't go back the same." Sophia nodded. "But sometimes what you rebuild is stronger." That spring, Elena took a trip alone to Big Sur. She left her laptop, left the phone on silent, brought only a journal and a camera. She hiked, watched the ocean, listened to herself breathe. For the first time in years, there was no schedule, no fear, no person she needed to prove anything to. Just space. And in that space, she realized that peace wasn't something you found. It was something you chose. When she returned to Seattle, she met Daniel for dinner. Not at Velvet Whisk, not at a fundraiser, just a quiet table at a lakeside restaurant with twinkling lights and a calm breeze. "I'm ready for that date now," she said, and smiled when his face lit up. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was the beginning of something better. Not because of what she had lost, but because of what she had reclaimed. 10 years had passed. A decade. Long enough for wounds to heal and scar over, for memories to settle into something less sharp. Something that no longer cut her in the middle of the night. Elena stood in the sunlight pouring through the front windows of her flagship cafe, the latest Velvet Whisk in San Francisco, and looked out over a private event that had taken months to plan. Today was not a business day. Today was something far more personal. There was laughter from the back patio, where strings of fairy lights hung between potted lemon trees. Children ran under the tables. A jazz trio played soft notes near the terrace, and waiters served champagne alongside trays of Elena's signature pastries. A towering cake, 3 tiers of almond and raspberry bliss, stood in the center of the room, crowned with white chocolate leaves and fresh berries. It wasn't for a customer. It was for her. Her wedding. Not to Lucas, of course. That chapter had long been closed and buried. Today, she wore white for the second time, but with an entirely different heart. This time, she married Daniel. The quiet, steady man who had waited for her heart to be ready, who had never once tried to overshadow her light, but had only ever tried to protect it. As the sun warmed her shoulders and Daniel's hand found hers, Elena remembered the first time she had truly believed in second chances. It hadn't been the moment Daniel first kissed her. It wasn't when she opened her second cafe or signed a new lease. It had come much earlier, when she looked in the mirror one morning and realized that she could build a life that had nothing to do with revenge. She could build one rooted in peace. Back then, she had thought revenge would look like a courtroom victory or a headline in the local press. But what she had learned was that the truest revenge came silently, through survival, and then through thriving. It came not from destroying your enemies, but from refusing to be destroyed. It came from living a life so full that there was no space left for bitterness. Elena and Daniel's children, 6-year-old Mateo and 4-year-old Iris, ran into her, arms after the ceremony, their laughter bright and chaotic, sticky with frosting. Daniel scooped them up and twirled them as Elena watched, a slow tear tracking down her cheek, not from sadness, but from something that felt like grace. The cafe had closed for the day, but in truth, it was more open than ever. Every member of her team from Seattle had flown in, including Sophia, now the mother of twins and CFO of a successful green energy startup. Sophia had stood by Elena's side through everything, and now stood as her maid of honor, her speech equal parts hilarious and moving. They'd grown apart and come back together, But in the end, they were more than friends. They were co-authors of the same survival story. After dinner, Sophia leaned in and whispered, "Your glow-up is criminal. If Lucas could see you now—" "I think he has," Elena replied, her voice calm, but unreadable. Because he had. It happened months earlier in the most ordinary of places, a grocery store in Seattle. Elena had returned to the city for a speaking engagement at a conference for women entrepreneurs. She hadn't planned to stop by her old neighborhood, but nostalgia got the better of her, and she had wandered into the store where she used to buy groceries during her early marriage. It felt harmless, routine. And then it happened. She turned a corner with her shopping cart and collided into another. A muttered apology was already on her lips when she looked up and froze. Natalie. The woman hadn't aged well. Her once styled, blonde hair was dull and messy, her makeup barely concealing the wear and tear of a life lived in hiding. Her eyes, which had once sparkled with confidence and calculation, now looked dim, shadowed, bitter. Natalie recognized her instantly. Her mouth twitched with something. An attempt at a smirk, maybe. She bumped her cart into Elena's again, deliberately, and then walked away without a word. And behind her, wheezing slightly as he reached for a bag of chips, was Lucas. He was heavier now, paler, dressed in a hoodie that hung awkwardly over a bloated frame. His once firm jawline had softened, his hair thinned. He didn't notice Elena. He didn't even look up. Just asked Natalie if she'd remembered to grab beer. Elena watched them for one moment longer than necessary. She wasn't angry. She wasn't satisfied either. She was, in some strange way, at peace. That life was theirs to carry. This life, this vibrant, sunlit, complicated, beautiful life, was hers. She never told Daniel about the run-in. She didn't need to. Some ghosts aren't worth naming. Now, at her wedding celebration, Elena looked around and saw every version of herself mirrored in someone else. The young interns in the kitchen reminded her of the hungry, wide-eyed girl who once thought success would shield her from betrayal. Her mother, who had once begged her to give Lucas another chance, now beamed with pride as she danced with her grandchildren. Sophia, who had risked her career and their friendship to tell her the truth, now held her hand during the vows. The guests raised a toast. Elena stood with Daniel, their fingers interlaced. "To love," someone called. "To second chances," another added. Elena raised her glass last. She didn't need to say much. Her smile was enough. That night, as the lights dimmed and Mateo finally fell asleep in his father's lap, Elena stepped outside onto the balcony of the suite they had booked for the night. The city skyline glittered below, as if trying to outshine the stars. She thought of the younger version of herself, naive, hopeful, lost in the idea of a man who had only ever wanted her for what she could give him. She didn't hate that girl. She pitied her. But more than that, she honored her. Because it had taken that kind of love to know what real love felt like. It had taken betrayal to show her what loyalty looked like. And it had taken destruction to reveal just how much she was capable of building. Elena placed a hand on her stomach. Just a soft, absent-minded touch. One that had become habit since the doctor had given her the news. It was still early. She hadn't told Daniel yet. But she would, soon. Their family was growing. Inside, Daniel stirred and walked over, placing a kiss on her temple. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just thinking." "About?" She turned to him, her eyes warm, full, alive. "About how they once calculated how much they'd get after getting rid of me," she said quietly. "But what they didn't realize was that I'd already started calculating how much more I'd become without them." Daniel smiled, kissed her again, and they walked inside. Elena Hart had survived the fire, and she hadn't just walked. out alive. She had risen, radiant, from the ashes. Elena Hart's story is not just one of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. It's a masterclass in human strength, transformation, and the quiet power of resilience. From the outside, her life once looked ideal: a thriving business, a seemingly loving husband, a future brimming with promise. But beneath that well-curated life lay a calculated lie, one that threatened to rob her not only of her dreams, but of her very existence. When she accidentally overheard her husband, Lucas, and his mistress Natalie plotting her downfall, her world didn't just shatter, it imploded. Everything she believed about loyalty, love, and trust was torn apart in a single moment. And yet, that moment, as dark and devastating as it was, became the catalyst for her rebirth. Elena's strength wasn't forged in the absence of fear. It was born in the heart of it. She didn't run away. She recalibrated. She turned to the one person she had wronged, her best friend Sophia, and rebuilt not only a friendship, but a support system strong enough to outmaneuver betrayal. Together, they crafted a silent storm, pulling away Lucas's access, exposing Natalie's fraud, and reclaiming Elena's life without ever raising their voices. But the most profound part of Elena's journey wasn't how she exposed her enemies. It was how she chose not to let them define her healing. She didn't devote her life to seeking revenge. She chose to grow, to pause, to rebuild. She took her time, invested in her own emotional recovery, and eventually opened her heart to love again. Not because she needed to, but because she had relearned how to trust herself first. Through Daniel, a man who didn't save her but stood by her, Elena discovered the difference between love that takes and love that gives. Together they built a family, surrounded by honesty, kindness, and respect. The very things she had once sacrificed in the name of false loyalty. In the end, Elena didn't win in a traditional sense. She didn't destroy Lucas or ruin Natalie, but she built a life so meaningful, so full, that their absence became irrelevant. That is the ultimate revenge, not destruction, but peace. Not rage, but growth. Not getting even, but moving forward. So what's the real lesson from Elena's story? It's this: your worth isn't defined by the people who betray you, but by how you rise when they do. The truth is, life will sometimes blindside you. You might be lied to, hurt, or misled by those you trust the most. But your power lies in how you choose to respond. Will you let it consume you? Or will you reclaim your voice, your space, and your purpose? Elena's journey teaches us to protect what matters, to listen when our instincts whisper, and to never be ashamed to start over. Whether it's a toxic relationship, a broken business deal, or a personal failure, your ability to pivot, to ask for help, and to rebuild with integrity is what sets you free. In your own life, maybe you're in a situation where someone has underestimated you, taken advantage of you, or betrayed your trust. Maybe you're wondering if you can walk away. Let this story remind you that not only can you walk away, you can walk toward something infinitely better. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were always right to keep going. Now it's your turn to reflect. If you were in Elena's shoes, what would have been your first step? A. Expose everything publicly. Confront them head on. B. Stay quiet, gather evidence, and plan your next move carefully. Comment your answer below, A or B. And let's see how many of you think like Elena. And while you're at it, what's your biggest takeaway from Elena's story? What did it make you feel? What part resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else might be going through something similar and need to hear your insight. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, comment, and most importantly, Subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you more bold, emotional, and empowering content just like this. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let's keep growing together.